Recently, I encountered a rather strange situation with my new boss. Even though I've been with the company for years and have a clear agreement on my leave, my boss unexpectedly disagreed with the amount of time I'd taken off. It felt like she had no clue about the leave policy, and I had no choice but to involve HR. But the story doesn't end there, as HR's response was anything but typical. Will I manage to keep my rights, or will I face another shock? It all started on a Monday morning when I received an email from my new boss. The email was short but left me feeling a bit surprised. She wrote, "Hi SML, I notice you've taken a lot of PTO recently. I've approved this for now, but when you are back, we need to discuss why you are taking so much time off. Thanks, boss." After reading it, I sat there for a moment, trying to understand why she was upset about this. For me, taking a portion of my annual leave early in the year to have more flexibility later on had always been a sensible approach. I had been doing this for several years without any complaints. In fact, very few people actually used up all of their leave days. But now, with the new boss in charge, it seemed like things had changed. She had no idea about my working habits, and the tone of her email made me feel like something was wrong. I thought for a while and decided to respond immediately, trying to stay calm while still wanting to explain myself clearly. "Hi boss, this is nothing new and I have done this every year. I tend to use up some annual leave in the first few months of the year and then some more in the last few months of the year. Please let me know if you are unhappy with this. Kind regards, SML." My reply was simple and polite, but I hoped it would help her understand that this was just how I had been working for a long time, and there was nothing strange about it. Not long after, I received another reply from her. "How much PTO do you have?" Honestly, this question left me even more confused. I couldn't imagine why she was asking about the number of leave days I had taken. Surely she must have seen my record and not understood how I could take so many days off in a year. But I couldn't stop wondering if she was questioning my total amount of leave, or if there was something else going on. So, I decided to give a more detailed explanation. "I assume you mean annual leave? I have the company's standard 31 days, plus an extra 3 days as negotiated in my contract. I also have 4 days carried over from last year. As of 31/03/25, I will have 27 days left for the year. I plan on taking 11 days in August, 8 days in December, and the remaining 8 days as and when needed." I felt like I had provided enough information to clarify my entitlements, and now I just hoped that she would understand the situation. But then, I received another email that made me feel even more perplexed and somewhat frustrated. "That seems excessive. We don't have that much PTO, so I'm unsure where your numbers are coming from. I have referred this to HR because I think this isn't right." She said my PTO was excessive and seemed unsure where I got these numbers from. This made me feel uneasy and more certain that she didn't fully understand my entitlements. Never had I thought that using part of my leave in the year could become such an issue. I began to worry that this new boss might cause problems with what had already been agreed upon in my contract. All I could do was wait and wonder whether my leave days would be considered too many and whether I would face some difficult situation ahead. After receiving the email from my boss, I began to feel like the situation was becoming more complicated. Not only was she questioning the amount of time I had taken off, but it also seemed like she didn't believe the details I provided about my leave entitlements. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help but feel worried, especially when she mentioned that she would refer the issue to HR because she thought something wasn't right. Clearly, she didn't fully understand my leave entitlements, and I started wondering if I was the only one facing this kind of situation. At this point, I decided to call HR to clarify everything, hoping they could give me a clear answer and help explain things to my new boss. When I explained my situation, the HR representative was very patient and listened attentively. I explained about my contract, which clearly stated I was entitled to the company's standard 31 days of leave, plus an additional 3 days I had negotiated when I signed my contract, and 4 days carried over from the previous year. HR wasn't surprised at all, and in fact, they laughed and told me, "SML, enjoy your week off. I wish I had a boss who would give me extra holiday leave." Their response made me feel relieved. At least I knew I wasn't in the wrong. However, what still worried me was whether my boss would understand everything that HR had explained. The fact that she didn't seem to grasp my entitlements could lead to unnecessary problems. I even wondered if she had encountered similar issues with other employees. My boss worked remotely from another country, and it seemed like she wasn't very familiar with the company's leave policies. This made me even more anxious about whether she would truly understand the terms and benefits I had agreed to in my contract. After the call with HR, I decided to send an email to my boss to explain that everything was in order and there was no need to worry. I wrote, "Hi boss, I've confirmed everything with HR and everything is correct as per my contract. My leave days are accurate and I've always taken leave according to the rules. Thank you for considering this matter." I hoped my boss would understand and wouldn't cause further tension, as I didn't want the situation to escalate. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The uncertainty about my boss's response made me uneasy. Would she agree with what HR had explained? Or would she continue to make things difficult for me? Honestly, I had no idea what would happen next. After sending the email to my boss, I felt a slight sense of relief, but the unease still lingered. Things seemed to have been clarified with HR, but I wasn't sure whether my new boss would accept my explanation. Since she works remotely and didn't seem familiar with the company's leave policies, I worried that she would continue to create obstacles for me. A few days later, I received another email from her. This time, the tone seemed slightly softer, but it still carried an underlying doubt. "Thank you for providing the information. However, I still don't understand why your leave days differ from other employees in the company. I don't think our company has a policy offering that many leave days." She went on to say she would need to check with HR again and that there might be a meeting to clarify the matter. I felt like things were still unresolved and the uncertainty was starting to weigh on me. When I read the email, I felt confused. Despite everything HR had told me, my boss still didn't fully trust the information I had provided. It seemed like she didn't understand that I was entitled to additional leave days due to an agreement I made when I joined the company, something that might not be available to others. I began to wonder if I was the only one dealing with this issue. The thought of facing a tense discussion with my boss made me even more anxious. However, I decided not to sit back and wait any longer. I called HR again, this time to double-check that all the information I had provided was accurate and to see if there was anything I had missed. HR responded quickly and reassured me once again, "SML, we've double-checked your information and everything is correct. You're entitled to that leave as per your contract. Don't worry, and if your boss has any more questions, we'll handle it." Hearing this confirmation from HR made me feel more at ease, but I still couldn't shake the worry about the potential meeting with my boss. The next day, I sent another email to my boss, trying to remain calm but also firmly asserting my rights. "Hi, boss. I understand there may be some misunderstanding regarding my leave days. However, as I've explained before, all the numbers are correct according to my contract. I hope we can find a reasonable solution and continue our work smoothly." I hoped this time my boss would understand, as I didn't want to waste more time and energy on unnecessary disputes. By the end of the day, I still hadn't received a response from her. The silence only made me more anxious. What would the meeting with HR and my boss be like? Would more issues arise? The uncertainty left me restless, and I could only wait to see what would happen next. The next day, I woke up feeling tense. Even though I had sent the email and received a response from HR, I still hadn't heard back from my boss. I couldn't stop thinking about the meeting she had mentioned, wondering if everything would be resolved smoothly or if things would get even more tense. I told myself I needed to mentally prepare for any situation, whether it was good or bad. As expected, in the afternoon, I received a call from my boss. She said she wanted to meet with me in a video call later that week to resolve the leave situation. When I heard this, I couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. Although I had been confirmed by HR that I wasn't wrong, the fact that my boss still insisted on having a meeting made me feel like the issue wasn't over yet. I knew this meeting wouldn't just be a casual conversation. My boss, although friendly and approachable, seemed to lack a full understanding of the company's leave policies, which made me nervous that she might impose unreasonable demands or even try to change things in a way I couldn't accept. This heightened my concern that I'd be facing a tense discussion with an uncertain outcome. Before the meeting, I decided to spend some time preparing thoroughly. I reviewed my contract, went over the company's leave policies again, and made sure I had all the necessary details. I also called HR one more time to get their advice on anything I should be aware of before the meeting. HR once again reassured me that I was in the right and shouldn't worry. However, they also advised me to be well prepared to defend my rights strongly in case the meeting didn't go as expected. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt more tense than ever. When I joined the video call, my boss started with a polite greeting, but I could sense the seriousness in her voice. She said that she still didn't fully understand why I was entitled to so many days off and wanted more clarity on the number of leave days I could take in a year. She asked if I could provide additional details on my previous leave history and if anyone else in the company had taken as much time off as I had. I patiently explained everything again, outlining the terms in my contract and why the number of leave days I had was reasonable. I also reiterated that this was an agreement that had been confirmed by HR and that there was nothing wrong with it. However, I could still sense confusion and a lack of understanding from my boss throughout the conversation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to find a way to reduce my leave days unreasonably. After a tense exchange, my boss promised that she would work with HR to clarify everything once again. I felt somewhat relieved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this issue might not be completely resolved easily. After the meeting, I felt a bit relieved, but the uncertainty still lingered. My boss had promised to work with HR to clarify everything, but I couldn't help but worry if things would actually end the way I hoped. In reality, I didn't know what to expect. While HR had confirmed my rights, the fact that my boss was still not fully convinced made me feel like nothing had been completely resolved. A few days passed, and I hadn't received any updates from my boss or HR. I started to feel the tension again. Every time I checked my email, I wondered if there was any new information. Not wanting to continue waiting in uncertainty, I decided to take the initiative and send a follow-up email. Hi boss, I'd like to confirm the status of my leave issue. Is there any further information needed to resolve this? I'm hoping for a quick resolution. I hoped my boss would reply clearly and ease my worries. At the same time, I heard a story from a colleague. She shared that my boss had done something similar with one of her friends, who wanted to take her full 52 weeks of maternity leave. At first, my boss didn't agree, thinking it was unreasonable to take such a long leave, but HR had confirmed that the person was fully entitled to it and even encouraged her to share baby pictures after the leave. This made me wonder if my boss truly understood the company's leave policies. I also started to realize that my boss might be struggling with remote management, especially when she couldn't access detailed employee benefits information the way people working directly in the office could. This made me even more anxious about whether she could make reasonable decisions. The lingering unease remained, but I tried to reassure myself that HR had my back, and I wasn't in the wrong. Finally, after a long week of waiting, I received an email from my boss. The email informed me that HR had rechecked everything with her and agreed with my leave entitlements. She said everything was fine now, and there would be no issues moving forward. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I couldn't help feeling a bit frustrated by all the tension and worry I had gone through. At least the issue was resolved, and I could return to my work without worrying about my leave. However, I couldn't stop thinking about these issues for the future. Would my boss change her attitude and gain a better understanding of employee rights, or would she continue to make things difficult for those with special entitlements? The lingering unease still stayed with me, and I promised myself that next time I would be more proactive in addressing any issues related to my rights.